Hi. I don't usually post, but I need help. I'm seriously starting to think something's wrong with our house, or maybe with me. I don't even know anymore. I'm a single parent. My daughter is 6. We moved into a small rental house about 2 months ago. Older place, creaky floors. Nothing fancy, but quiet and cheap. She loved it right away, especially her bedroom. She has this stuffed teddy bear she has had since she was 2. She takes it everywhere. It's old, worn down, one eye a little loose, but she refuses to sleep without it. It was just a normal toy until a few weeks ago. One night, she came into my room around 2 a.m. and said he was talking again. I asked who, and she said the bear. I thought she was dreaming. She said he doesn't like this house. I tucked her back in, told her she was safe, and went back to bed. A few nights later, she came back again. He said you were listening, she whispered. That one made me pause, but I still figured she was imagining things. Then weird stuff started happening. Sometimes I'd pass by her room at night and hear whispering, 2 voices, low and quiet. When I opened the door, she'd be asleep. The bear would be in her arms, turned toward her face. I thought maybe she was talking in her sleep, but then I started finding the bear in strange places. One morning it was sitting upright on her dresser facing the bed. Another time it was on the floor by the doorway, positioned perfectly like it was waiting. She swore she didn't move it. I even tested her once. I put the bear on the top shelf of her closet before bedtime where she couldn't reach it. At around 3 a.m. I woke up to a soft thud. When I checked it, it was back in her bed. She was sound asleep. The next morning I asked her about it. She got quiet and said, he doesn't like being up there. He gets lonely. I laughed it off, but she didn't smile. She just said, you shouldn't touch him. Something about the way she said that, calm, flat, got under my skin. That night, I stayed up late. Around 3 a.m., I heard this faint shuffling sound from her room. I peeked in and the bear was sitting up, not in her arms, just next to her, propped up, staring towards the door. I stood there for a long time trying to convince myself it was just her moving in her sleep. The next day, I checked the bear. It's just fabric and stuffing, no electronics, no batteries. But when I held it, it felt heavier than it should. I almost cut it open just to see, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. That night, she woke me again. This time, she was holding the bear by one arm and said, he wants to talk to you. I said, what do you mean? She lifted it up toward me and whispered, say hi. I told her to go back to bed. She frowned and said, you made him mad. I took the bear after she fell asleep and put it in the closet. Around 3 a.m., I heard something fall. I ran in. The closet door was open, and the bear was lying halfway out. She was still asleep. The next morning, she had dark circles under her eyes. I asked if she was okay, and she said, he doesn't like the closet. He said you should apologize. I didn't know what to say to that. That evening, I caught her sitting on the floor holding the bear, whispering. I asked what she was doing, and she said, listening. I said, listening to what? She said, he's telling me about before. Before what? She didn't answer. Later that night, I was on the couch when I heard her bedroom door creak open. When I looked, the bear was in the hallway, sitting upright, facing my room. She was asleep. I threw it in the kitchen trash. The next morning, she couldn't find it and started screaming. "You shouldn't have done that," she cried. "He's going to be mad." I told her it was gone. She stared at me, totally calm, and said, "He's not gone. He told me he's coming back." I took out the trash right then, watched the garbage truck pick it up the next morning. That night, I woke up around 3:10 a.m. to the sound of something soft hitting the floor. When I turned on the light, the bear was sitting at the foot of my bed. Its fur was damp. I grabbed it, shoved it in a garbage bag, and locked it in my car trunk. The next morning, I drove to the dump and got rid of it myself. I made sure it was gone. For a few days, everything felt normal again. Until last night. I woke up to her laughing, not playfully, but this quiet, muffled giggle. I went into her room, and she was sitting up in bed, facing the wall. I asked what she was doing, and she said, playing with the bear's name. I froze. "Sweetie, remember? The bear's name is gone." She smiled, this slow, sleepy grin, and said, "He came back. He missed me." There was nothing in her hands, nothing on the bed, but the air felt cold. She turned toward the empty space beside her and whispered, "See? I told you he'd find us." I didn't sleep after that. I checked every inch of the house, even the car. The bear's gone. Physically gone. But this morning, when I went to wake her up, there were faint paw prints across her blanket. And her window was open. She's been quiet all day, just humming to herself and talking under her breath. I tried to record her once, but when I played it back, there was static, and under it, this low, slow breathing that didn't sound like her. I deleted it. Tonight, I told her we might go stay with my sister for a bit. She didn't even look at me. She just said, "You can go. He doesn't want you here anymore." Then she rolled over and went to sleep. It's 3:07 a.m. right now. I can hear soft footsteps in the hallway. Her door just creaked. I don't know if I should go in there. I keep telling myself it's her, that she's just awake and moving around. But part of me knows what I'll see if I open that door. I don't know what to do. If anyone's ever experienced anything like this, if you know how to make it stop, please tell me. Because I think the bear is back. And I think this time, he isn't just here for her. My name is Ethan. This story happened in October of 2016, when 4 of my friends and I took a weekend hiking trip up in northern New Hampshire, more specifically the White Mountains. We were all college students at a fairly local university, which if you're from or familiar with New Hampshire, you know how beautiful the mountains are in the fall. It was me, Kyle, Danielle, Mason, and Jake. All being students in New Hampshire, we're all pretty experienced with trails. Nothing insane like technical climbing or backcountry survival, but enough that we'd seen our fair share in the woods prior. We picked the biggest popular trail to avoid the foliage, tourists planning to camp about halfway up and finish by late Sunday. The first day was completely normal. Cold, crisp air, quiet even. We made camp that night without any issue. The sun set normal timing for the season, around 6 p.m. We built a fire just off the trail, cooked, had a few beers, and went to bed in our 2 tents. Guys in one, Danielle in the other. That's when everything truly started. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to what I thought were footsteps. Not like heavy stomping or anything, but soft, slow crunches in the leaves, just outside the tent. As I said, we've seen our fair share in the woods before this trip. I figured it was a deer or maybe even a black bear sniffing around if we were really unlucky. But then it stopped, and stayed quiet for way too long. I held my breath trying to listen. Then Mason, who was next to me, whispered, "You hear that too?" I said yeah, and we both just stayed frozen. Then a twig snapped. Not random, this sounded deliberate, like someone stepping right outside the tent. Kyle, half asleep, mumbled, "Chill, it's probably an animal." But it didn't feel like that. You know when you know someone's watching you? After a bit, it went silent again. I don't know how long we laid there, but I finally drifted off again. The next morning, I asked Danielle if she heard anything. She looked at me weirdly, saying, "I thought that was one of you walking around." That definitely creeped me out. We searched the area, but didn't see any signs of anything. Just some disheveled leaves that could have been tracks, but it's the woods. It's nearly impossible to say just based off that. We kept hiking that day, climbing higher up into the range. The trees got sparser, and the trail narrowed. That's when Kyle stopped and said, "Yo, you see that?" We all looked ahead. I swear to God, standing maybe 60 feet off the trail, deep in the trees, was someone. Just barely visible, wearing something dark, not moving. Jake waved and yelled hello over trying to be friendly. We all looked over at him, probably wondering what the hell is he doing. Whoever or whatever it was didn't respond. They didn't even flinch. Mason said it was likely another hiker. It's October during all the foliage. If there's any time for people to be here hiking or camping like us, it's now. But it didn't feel right. No gear, no pack, just still, watching. Then they just walked away. Not down the trail, into the woods, barely making a sound. We were all freaked but Mason. He seemed stuck on the idea it was just another hiker. We should have just turned around right then, but we didn't. That night, we set up camp again. A little higher up, still on the trail, but in a tight cluster of pines. We barely talked. None of us wanted to admit how weird things were getting. Mason kept trying to reassure us, but I could tell it was getting to him too. Around midnight, I woke up to rustling. Not footsteps this time. Running. Like something darting back and forth through the brush. Kyle slightly unzipped the tent and peeked out just barely, only enough to not be seen. I'll never forget his voice when he whispered, "Dude, there's someone out there." He waved me over, and when I looked, I caught a glimpse of something just slipping behind a tree. It was a face, just a face, but pulled back like it was hiding, and high up, really high up. This thing had to be extremely tall. I'm not exaggerating, at least 6'6". What the hell? I was praying this was a dream. We were just seeing something. We were still drunk from the beers we had at the fire. Then, Danielle started yelling from her tent. I think my heart dropped down to my feet. I looked over at Kyle and could tell the same happened to him. But nothing. No noise, no more running, anything. We ran over to Danielle, realizing she must have scared it off. She was in her tent holding bear spray, crying to herself. We comforted her and brought her over to our tent. We sat up all night, taking turns watching. Nothing else happened. As soon as sunlight hit, we packed up fast. The worst part was on the hike out. We were probably less than a mile from the trailhead when we realized Jake wasn't with us. At first we thought he was just behind, and he liked to stop and take photos. But that made no sense. Why the hell would he be taking photos during how tense of a moment this is? He was helping us to watch the tent. He knew what was out there. 10 minutes turned into 30. Then an hour. We split up a little to look, looping back, yelling his name. We never found him. No answer, no tracks, no sounds, no gear. We called search and rescue, the school, local police, everything. They combed the area for days. Drones, dogs, helicopters. Nothing. It's nearly a decade later. Jake is still missing to this day. His phone last pinged near the trail the same morning we lost him. They ruled it an unsolved disappearance. Likely a black bear. But here's the part I haven't told anyone, not the police, not his parents. A week later, I got an airdrop request on my phone while I was home. It said, Jake's iPhone. The image that came through was pitch black, but when I brightened it, there was something. Long limbs, a face that looked directly in the camera, and a smile stretched wider than physically possible. It was taken out in those trees where we saw that figure. The timestamp? 3:11 a.m. The night after Jake disappeared. I don't know what we saw out there. I don't know if I'm going insane. I own a home now and work a job a state away. I still hear things in the woods behind my house. Sometimes I think I do even in my house. I haven't spoken to the group much since we graduated college. Except for Danielle, she claims to still hear and see things, like she's being followed. Apparently Kyle tells her the same. If we're not going insane and it wasn't a bear like the police say, then we're being stalked by something or someone, maybe even more than one. Even all these years later, and something tells me it doesn't plan on stopping anytime soon. I don't know if Jake is dead, if he's alive somewhere being tortured. I have no idea, but I swear sometimes the noises I hear in the woods behind my home is his voice, calling out to me, telling me to come to him. If you're hiking in New Hampshire, don't go off trail. And don't ignore that feeling when you're being watched. Because I don't know what, but something or someone is out there. And it took Jake. When I was young, I lived on a farm in rural Oregon with my parents. I was an only child. We weren't a big commercial farm, just a family type thing. We had 5 cows, 3 horses, a small herd of goats, 2 dogs, and 1 chicken coop. We also had some Indian runner ducks we kept mostly as pets. We didn't really make any money off the place, just enough to sustain the animals and a little extra for ourselves. Money enough to take a decent vacation every couple of years. Dad had his other job in town, an insurance agent. He was the only one around, really. Town wasn't more than about 1,500 people. Mom gave horse riding lessons as well. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. It was really an easy life, or at least it could have been a lot worse. I went to school, Dad went to work, Mom took care of the animals, then we all had dinner together every night, and I would go to bed while Mom and Dad had a beer or two and watched the news. Sometimes at night I would hear things outside, mostly just normal stuff. The cows or horses would get spooked by a coyote or something, or I would hear the dogs chasing a rabbit, barking their heads off. Every once in a great while, we would find a chicken dead. Dad would always tell me about it, but never let me see the body, although I asked frequently. He would keep Mom and I inside until he had gone out and did whatever he did with the body, throw sawdust over any blood, and then life would go on as normal. I assumed it was foxes, as I had seen a couple of them out in the pasture over the years, slinking around back and forth through the grass. The summer when I was 10 years old, I remember helping Mom change the bedding in the horses' stalls when we heard a huge racket going on outside. If you've never heard the sounds of a horse in pain, you don't want to, trust me. It sounds almost like a person screaming. Well, that's what we heard, and one of our horses, the Palomino, came running into the barn with a wound on its left thigh. 4 long marks, like claw marks, ran across its body for about a foot. It had blood running down its leg and was limping. I was so scared by the sight of that much blood that Mom locked the horse in a stall and made me go inside with one of the dogs. She told me to lock the door and stay inside until she came in to get me. I did. Eventually, Mom came inside and told me that the horse had hurt itself on the barbed wire that ran the perimeter of the pasture. We owned more land beyond that, but it was mostly forested. I guess I believed her at the time, but at dinner that night I noticed Dad was being particularly quiet and Mom was talking a lot more than she normally did. She was being really animated, and I noticed that Dad had gotten his rifle out and set it by the back door. Usually he only did that when the coyotes had been acting up. That night I went to bed as normal, but I had trouble falling asleep. I turned on my desk lamp and decided to read comic books until I got tired. I had a very vivid memory of reading Uncanny X-Men and hearing the back door open. Looking out, I could see my dad by the porch light, lighting a cigarette and holding his rifle under his arm. He started walking over to the driveway and then turned to follow the fence line. I couldn't sleep until I knew Dad was back safe. I kept coming downstairs with the excuse of getting water to see if Dad was back in the house yet, and each time all I saw was Mom sitting on the couch in the living room, staring at a blank TV screen, and looking worried, sighing occasionally. Eventually, about 4 in the morning, I think, Dad did come back, and I was so tired and relieved that I fell asleep as soon as I knew he was home. He never told me what he did that night, but I never thought to ask. 2 months later, I was back in school. It rains a lot in Oregon in the fall, and this day was no different. All I could hear from my bedroom was rain hitting the ground and the aluminum roof of the chicken coop. There was light thunder in the distance, but it was slowly getting closer. I thought I had heard a coyote yapping out around the garage, or it could have been one of the dogs. I looked out, straining my eyes to see whatever there may have been. In a brief and distant lightning flash, I saw something. It looked almost like a person, but hunched over and with a long torso. It was tall, taller than Dad, who was a good 6'4", at least. I just barely caught a glimpse of it on the near side of the garage. Then the light faded, and I didn't see it again that night. There was another dead chicken the next morning, the third in just as many weeks. I told Dad what I had seen the previous night. The color went out of his cheeks momentarily, until he told me that the storm must have been playing tricks on me. I accepted that. 4 months after we lost a cow, it was the middle of the night, and we all woke up at the same time. There was a lot of noise in the pasture, but only briefly. The cry of a dying animal, and a primitive, guttural yell that I had never heard before. Dad rushed up to my room. I could hear him running up the stairs to my room. He had his rifle in hand and opened my door. He saw I was awake and told me to stay inside no matter what and try to go back to sleep. I don't think I have to say that sleep was really an option any longer, but I did stay in my room with a blanket held tight around my shoulders and staring out the window. Probably about 10 minutes later, I heard gunshots in the field. I don't know what he was shooting at, whether it was whatever had attacked the cow or the cow itself, trying to put the animal out of its misery. Dad rarely, if ever, talked about that night. I later found out that he had gotten to the cow only to find it ripped open on the ground, bleeding out from his torso. The shots I heard were him shooting the cow in the head. It kept going like that, for years. A chicken or duck here and there. Something bigger, only very rarely. It sounds absurd, but I almost came to think of it as a commonplace. I only ever caught glimpses of the thing until what comes next. It terrified me. It happened in the middle of the day, over the course of a long weekend when my parents had gone to Seattle to see my uncle who was ill. It was on a Saturday afternoon. I was 17 years old. I was out in the barn putting out food for the horses and the dogs. The horses were running around out in the pasture, and the dogs were asleep in the corner of one of the horse stalls. I heard something rustling in the tall grass outside in the pasture. The dogs looked around a little bit, but didn't seem to mind. I assumed it was just one of the horses waiting for me to leave so they could eat. I kept going about what I was doing, and in several minutes I thought I heard breathing. I turned to look, and it was standing in the door. Tall as hell, even hunched over. The sun was streaming in behind it, lighting up all the dust in the air around it like some kind of sickly halo. It was looking at me, considering me. Maybe it was trying to decide whether or not I was food. I remember swearing, turning and running as fast as I could for the house, not even thinking. Panic causing my legs to move. It was behind me, not even breathing hard. I heard its feet hitting the ground in a constant rhythm. I got to the house, opened the door, slammed it behind me, and locked it as fast as I could. I tore through the house, locking every door and drawing the blinds on every window. I could hear it snarling outside the back door. The dogs were barking at it, but they wouldn't try to attack the thing. It was too big, and they knew it. It roared at the dogs, and they ran off, probably to hide in the pasture. I went to my parents' room and got Dad's rifle. I loaded it, set up a chair in the living room facing the back door, and waited. It started prowling around the house. I could hear its feet crunching on the gravel of the driveway and the wooden planks of the back deck. It kept walking back and forth. I thought about trying to look through a window to see it, but I was too scared. Eventually, after hours of hoping it would go away, the sun went down. I turned on all the outside lights and went up to my room. I opened my window with the rifle in my hands, hoping to be able to pick the thing off from above. I saw it lurking just beyond the glow from the porch light. It had long, sinewy arms and walked on bent knee. It was by the chicken coop. Then it disappeared from view. I heard the chickens squawking and screeching. The thing reappeared with a dead, bloody chicken in its hands. It bit off one of the wings with jaws that were dripping with slime and drool and let the dead bird drop to the ground at its feet. Then it looked at me. Its eyes made contact with my eyes. It turned away again, back to the chickens. It came back with another bird, mutilated it in front of me and dropped it. It went back again, and again. I should have taken a shot at it, but I was astounded and confused trying to figure out what it was doing. Then it hit me. It was a show of power. It was showing me that it was stronger than me, that it could do whatever it wanted to do because I couldn't stop it. At the same time, I felt powerless and sickened. Powerless because what it was saying was true. If it was just that thing in me, I wouldn't stand a chance. Sickened because I realized what kind of intelligence it would need to be able to convey that message. The thought shook me out of my stupor, and I remembered the rifle at my side. It was heading back to the chickens, and I decided when it came back, I would take my shot. It strode back to the porch, almost arrogant, walking on bended knees with those arms so long that the chicken was nearly dragging on the ground. I raised the rifle up to my eye and tried to steady myself. My heart was beating so hard I could see the rifle shaking ever so slightly in rhythm. With each heartbeat I could hear pounding in my own ears. It raised the body to its mouth, and just as it was about to put the chicken's head inside, I squeezed the trigger. The crack of the gun echoed in the now shattered quiet of the nighttime standoff. I heard a howl. A painful, loud, startled howl. It ran off into the night. I never saw it again. It was still out there, though. It still killed chickens and other things, more often than before. I'm writing all of this now because my parents died 3 weeks ago. They were killed in a collision with a drunk driver. He survived. They left me with the farm, and I intend to live here with my own family. I'm 32 now, and I work for an Oregon Fish and Game office in Salem. I'm married to a wonderful woman named Stephanie. We have one son, Zachary, who is 4 years old. We are expecting a daughter in 4 months. I've come to the farmhouse alone today. I told Steph that I just wanted some time alone in my parents' house to deal with some emotions. She was very understanding. I've come back to claim what is rightfully mine. I have Dad's rifle next to me on the table, and it is almost dusk. I've also brought several portable halogen lights to set up around the house, and my own shotgun. I'm borrowing a handgun from Joe, a guy at Fish and Game who I work with. When I am done typing this account of my memories, I will print it out and leave it on the dining room table, along with my wedding ring and my key to the safe deposit box where my will is kept. Everything is loaded and ready. Hopefully I will return here to collect these things and nobody will ever know I wrote this. Steph, in the event that you are the unfortunate soul to find this, which I'm terrified to think seems the likely outcome, the thought of you having to go on alone hurts me more than anything in this world ever can. Know that I love you more than anything, and I hope you understand that I'm doing this to keep you safe. Zachary, I love you and can only hope you grow up to be a good, kind-hearted, and strong man like your grandfather was. To my unborn daughter, if I don't live long enough to meet you, it will be the single greatest regret of my life. Tell the police, tell Fish and Game, call Joe. He's one of the few people who knows about this. Make this situation known. Eventually, someone will kill it, even if it isn't me. Goodbye. For now. I'm sure many of you have been to a newly remodeled McDonald's, possibly one with a McCafe. But have you ever looked up why they started remodeling the restaurants in the first place? The first McCafe in the States popped up in Chicago back in May of 2001. That was just the beginning. Now, over the last 5 years, McDonald's has taken to remodeling every single restaurant in America. Most of you might even be asking yourself how long it's been since you stepped foot in an old McDonald's. Ask anyone who's done some market research and you'll hear something strange. McDonald's loses money on the process. It's a fact. The new furniture isn't pulling new customers, and the McCafes can't sell coffee that cheap and turn a profit. Look at Starbucks prices and you'll see what I mean. Stakeholders say they wanted a more adult vibe for the restaurant, a classier look for a classier America. Wrong answer. Google it right now. What's McDonald's target age group? It's children and teens. It always has been. So then why did they start all these remodels? Why would one of the largest corporations in America spend over $1 billion on a terrible marketing strategy? That's where things get interesting. Let's start with the play places. If you can remember, almost no two play places at McDonald's were identical. Some of them were really fun. I know I had a few favorites. Well, some of them were also really dangerous. The first gem I could find was a carousel play place in Lancaster, Pennsylvania back in the 1980s that got shut down mere months after opening. Little information was given about why they closed. The lot has been vacant ever since. If you find the right connections in Lancaster, though, you just might be able to read an article that didn't make it to print. Children would play on the merry-go-round in ways they weren't supposed to, you see. They're kids, so of course they would. Well, one day a few kids managed to crawl underneath the thing, but then they never made it back out. The whole incident was so heavily guarded by McDonald's PR, you'd be troubled to find a single person that was even there that whole afternoon. The only witness anyone could find had this to say. When they went under, a few parents stopped calling for help, and something happened to the lights. The carousel kept getting brighter, and the music was deafening. I ran out the building when the machine started to smoke, but I looked back through the window to see if the kids were all right, and the employees were just standing there behind the registers. They looked like they were still waiting for customers. Weirder and weirder stories picked up from there through the years. Reports of children sinking into ball pits that should only be a foot deep. Mothers searching play tubes for their kids, only to find a lonely pair of shoes. But the play places held a mere fraction of the incidents. Back in 1996 in Knoxville, Tennessee, there was a businessman of his 40s who went into a McDonald's restroom and remained there for 7 hours. Patrons noted that he refused to leave the furthest back stall. The police were finally called and they managed to break the door down. He was restrained by paramedics as he wouldn't willingly leave the restroom. As they pulled him out the stall, he began screaming bloody murder. "Take me back! I want to go back!" But the moment he exited the restaurant, he passed out. He had no memory of ever going into a McDonald's the day of the incident. The restaurant was shut down before anyone could inspect the stall he had shut himself in. However, anyone who used the restroom that day mentioned hearing several voices whispering things like, "It wasn't him. We have to go back. Saw you smile." Then there was a fry cook somewhere in Vermont back in '99 who walked into the middle of the restaurant and dumped scalding oil on himself without flinching or saying a word. Several of the customers started to laugh and roll around in the burning oil alongside him, and all were rushed to the hospital. Only one survived but refuses to make a statement. Not that she easily could. Her throat melted all the way through and had to be completely restructured. The manager claimed he didn't remember even hiring the fry cook and that he wasn't in any official paperwork. His name tag didn't even have a name, just numbers written on it. Once again, the McDonald's was closed without a trace. Most of the stories sounded like urban legends to me, but it never failed. Wherever I found a story, a McDonald's had been shut down in its wake. Near the late 2000s, the number of cover-ups had become so frequent that McDonald's decided to shut all of them down and rebuild. Every single one. But of course, they'd miss a few. I needed to see one for myself. I remember going in the old McDonald's as a kid, but that was before the frequency of the incidents. That was when it was all still safe. There was a small town on the way to my parents' house just off the highway. Orozca was its name. Maybe 100 residents. Completely untouched by the outside world, practically forgotten. It was pointless to stop there for any normal reason because there wasn't a gas station or rest stop. Not even a sign to let you know you were close. Let's just say I had to sneak my way around some very old building permits to discover that they had one of the few McDonald's, aside from some treasured landmarks, that has yet to go through a remodel since the 1970s. How lucky is that? I was surprised they even had a fast food place, yet they didn't have a market or post office. I planned a trip to my parents' place for the weekend, with a stop at Orozco on the way. It was already dark out since it was the dead of winter and I didn't get off work till 5. I was cold and grumpy about driving at night, but mostly determined. I don't think I would have ever found the place before phone GPS. The turnoff from the highway was just a dirt road with no landmarks or anything. As I pulled into town, none of the houses had lights on. Most of the street lights were out as well, as though nobody had remembered to change the bulbs in years. This place was really untouched. I'd be surprised if most of the residents hadn't moved out or simply died off. It definitely had the makings of a ghost town anyway. I was about to lose hope when I finally saw it. The nauseous yellow light of those golden arches illuminating a vacant parking lot in the distance. It buzzed and flickered like a fly zapper running out of batteries. The sign below said, "Eat new eggs McMuffin. We like to saw you smile." Which I assumed was just a lazy teen's handiwork. I pulled into the lot and carelessly parked my car in the center. There was nobody else there anyway. When I stepped out of my car, I felt a squish under my foot. There was a burger covered in mold with a rancid liquid oozing out. The smell was absolutely vomit-worthy. I jumped out to scrape the contents of the burger from my shoe when I noticed the whole parking lot was covered in trash. There were half-eaten boxes of fries and sun-baked chicken's toys spilling out of old greased-up McDonald's bags. Everything was mixed up in the dirt and snow like it had been there for months, possibly years. I hurried across the lot to avoid retching all over the asphalt. As I approached the door, I noticed the windows were caked in dust. Somebody had taped a piece of paper to the door with the word "closed" scribbled across it in red marker, yet the sign hung from the inside clearly said "open." Cautiously, I approached the door and pushed. An artificial bell hummed an old McDonald's tune that fizzled out on the last few notes as the door creaked open. I looked around the fluorescent-lit room and saw it was void of life. There was nobody sitting at any of the tables and nobody attending the registers. Somebody had left a tray on one of those tables in the back, but there was no other sign someone had been there. The inside was at least a little cleaner. The toys on display by the counter were of characters I've never heard of, likely before my time. The whole place was covered in faded coats of yellow and red paint, and all the tables had that classic McDonald's wood finish. The wood looked completely rotten, but slathered in coats of polish as a sad attempt to keep it looking new. All of it had a sort of green hue, which I contributed to the old lights. The most noticeable element, though, was a terrible burning plastic smell that stung my nose. I went up to the register. I felt like I shouldn't order anything, but I was hoping maybe I could ask someone a few questions. I waited for a good 15 minutes in silence. I shouted hello with only a muted echo for a response. I'd been to a few McDonald's with bad service in the past, but this was insane. With how dirty the whole place was, I should have expected as much. Just as I was about to turn around and give up, the cash register popped open. It was practically begging me to take a tip for myself. Besides, didn't I deserve a slight reward for wasting my time here? I casually walked over to it and saw at least a dozen 20s stacked high. Looking around to make sure nobody was watching, I reached in to take a few bills when the thing suddenly snapped closed right on my fingers. The metal dug deep into my flesh, leaving a dark trail of blood down the side of the counter. I yelped in pain. Behind the counter at the other end of the grill was a first aid kit hanging on the wall. The lights were burned out in the kitchen area, but I needed a bandage pronto. I hopped over the table and made my way to the back. The burning smell was getting stronger as I walked. I noticed the grill was covered in a thick layer of grease, completely unsuitable for cooking. I passed by the frying station and the oil was filled to the top with maggots. I quickened my walk to the first aid, hoping to get patched up and out of there as soon as possible. I was starting to realize that this restaurant definitely wasn't open for business anymore, and I probably shouldn't have entered it in the first place. I opened up the first aid kit and had to swallow some vomit. A cloud of mold burst out from it in every direction, followed by the same bubbling black ooze that was on the burger outside. I started coughing and waving my hands in the air to clear the mold dust floating around. The same bell I heard playing that McDonald's tune started up again as I steadied myself. I assumed it was broken like the rest of this dump. I looked back toward the counter and noticed everything seemed farther away. I must have been disoriented from losing blood and that awful smell. I looked down at my hand to see how bad the wound was, and my eyes widened. There was no wound on my hand at all. I rushed back towards the counter in a panic when something under the stove caught my foot, and I fell. In the darkness, my eyes started to adjust, and I saw the outline of a body. Somebody was under there. Maybe they were unconscious and needed help. I yanked at the person's arm, and a half-decayed body slid out across the floor. They were wearing a McDonald's employee shirt with a name tag that read numbers. Their mouth was contorted into a sickening grin, but their eyes were screaming. I tried to shout, but no sound came out like when trying to wake up from a nightmare. As I scrambled to get back up to the counter, the lights had started to dim and the McDonald's tune was getting louder, the notes fizzling and distorting as they played. Once I had gotten my grip above the counter, I froze. Since entering, I never looked at the side of the restaurant opposite the counter. There was a play place. The glass separating the main restaurant from the play area had hundreds of bloody handprints smearing down toward the floor. The tube slide was caved in with chunks of red liquid spurting out from the tiny hole left at the bottom. There was a row of nooses tied to the monkey bars in the corner with employees wearing the same numbers, name tags, hanging from them. The tables around the perimeter had skeletons with rotting food left on trays, some of the food hanging from the skulls' mouths. I looked in horror, too shocked to move. While the rest of the restaurant went dark, a bulb in the center of the play place continued to glow like a carnival spotlight. Below it was a massive ball pit, barely able to contain all its colored plastic balls. It was smoking under the blaring white light, making that awful, burning plastic smell. The balls began to rattle and fall off the edge when something inside started shuffling around. I wanted to run so badly, but my body refused. Then suddenly, the music went dead and the movement stopped. A yellow glove slowly crept upward from the pit below, writhing its fingers as it went. A connected red and white sleeve came after it, slowly alternating colors as they appeared from beneath. The arm continued to reach toward the sky, growing more and more, while its joints popped and cracked like breaking branches. By the end, that arm had to be at least 6 feet long. It finally reached for the lit bulb on the ceiling with its gangly gloved fingers and began to twist it loose. I broke into a sprint, jumping over the counter and toppling chairs as I went. That last light went out just as I got to the exit. I bashed through the door, breaking the glass in the process. As I rolled into the parking lot, I heard a distant scream, and then something whispered right next to my ear in dead silence. It had the same teeny distortion as the McDonald's tune. "Come back. I want to see you smile." I haven't told anyone about what happened there that night. There was an article online saying a Rosca burned to the ground a few days later. I don't know if it was a cover-up for something else, but I'm never going back to find out. I didn't share this because I want you to get involved, by the way. I shared it to warn you what happens when you do. You can go to a new McDonald's, keep getting your Big Macs, get your McCafe coffee. That's fine. They did something to the remodels to make them safe, at least for now. But don't ever go into an old McDonald's. Not even the drive-thru. I've got to stop typing now and get some pain meds. My jaw hurts and the hand I snapped in that register has been getting itchy. As a child, I was prone to waking up in the middle of the night. About once a week, my eyes would burst open as if something had awoken me, but there was never anything there. There were the echoes of a noise that I couldn't recall, a silence that reminded me of something deafening, but no one else ever seemed to feel it. At first, I would simply try to return to sleep, but always found myself unable to. At some point, I would roll out of my bed, pitter-patter down the hallway, and try to wake my brother up so I wouldn't be alone in the night. No matter how I yelled or shook, he would never wake up. Inevitably, I would find myself crawling into his bed and simply waiting what felt like hours until I would also return to sleep, comforted by his presence. I was just a little kid who looked up to his older brother, and I believed that he could protect me from anything, even in his sleep. As an adult, the problem persists. However, there is no one here to comfort me. I live on my own now, no family in the area, and no girlfriend in my life, but I still find myself waking up at least once a week. It is no longer to a silent sound that I can't recall, but rather to the sounds of a screaming baby just one house over. I don't mind it so much. I know it must be more of a hassle for the parents than for myself, but it can be tiresome. Instead of tossing and turning in bed, I brew myself some hot cocoa and add in just the smallest spike of Crown Royal whiskey. I'll then make my way to my computer chair where I can enjoy an hour or two of warm conversations on 4chan before the fuzzy feelings of sleep invited me back to my bed. When I first awoke last night, I had no reason to think this was anything other than business as usual. If the baby had been crying, I seemed to just have missed it. But it wasn't something I gave much thought to. It was a bit earlier than usual, about 2 a.m., and I stayed at my computer until almost 6. I knew the sun would be coming up soon, and had already enjoyed 2 mugs of my spiked beverage. If I didn't return to bed then, there wouldn't be another chance until the sun went down. It was my day off, but I could only sleep in until about 9, as I had plans to meet up with my friend pretty early for a trip to the beach. I crawled into bed, pulled my covers up over me, and let myself be comforted by the waves of warmth. As was typical, I found myself rolling over here and there as I waited to succumb to my tiredness, occasionally opening my eyes to try and peek at the rising sunlight through my window, but it never came. Rolling around quickly became tossing and turning, and peeks at my window became glances at my phone. By 7 a.m. I knew the sun should be up, but it wasn't until 8 that I knew something must be wrong. I had to wake up in an hour anyway, so I figured I might as well get an early start and wake myself up with a shower. Before heading into the restroom, I stopped to look out the blinds of my window and was surprised to see there wasn't even the crack of dawn in the distance. I mused over whether or not I had missed something important, as if I could have drunkenly forgot daylight savings in the dead of summer. The thought of it made me laugh. But when I returned from my long shower, I was no longer laughing. It was almost 9 a.m. now, but the sun still wasn't up. I flipped open my phone with frustration and began a Google search for my own local time, thinking that my Android's internal clock had simply messed up. But the internet showed the exact same time I was seeing on my device, give or take a minute. This led me on a hunt across the house, checking every piece of technology I had. From the old watch at the bottom of a drawer to my computer in the home office, to the time on my TV, everything showed the same consistent time, now well into 9:30. When flipping through the channels of the television, everything seemed to still be playing late night. There was no early morning news, no talk shows, and no traffic or weather reports. Every station was playing classic Looney Tunes, syndicated black family sitcoms, and the kind of infomercials people only witness when no one else is awake. Next, I took it to the internet. I scoured every social media platform I could imagine. Facebook had updates, but they were only the kind that you would see late at night. But the 3 a.m. thoughts of people who binged watched something into the morning and needed to simply put their voices out in the world to be acknowledged. I tried to acknowledge them. I tried to reply. I tried to like. I tried to share. But there were no reactions to my reaction. Then came the cell phones. It started with text, but I gave up fast on that. I began to call every single number I had, even hotlines and businesses, but no one ever answered them. I left messages everywhere, begging them to talk to me, begging them to tell me what was going on, but no matter what I threw into the void, nothing ever returned. I even placed a call to my local police station, first the non-emergency line, but then I called 911 when I only found an answering machine, though in the end, I got the same message. After hours of harassing people online and on my phone, it was now well past noon. I'd been checking the windows to see if anyone else woke up, but if they did, they never left their houses. I didn't blame them. I was scared to leave too, but how else could I discover what was happening to everyone else? And so I donned my shoes and put on a shirt and made my way to the front door. There is something unsettling about trying to leave your house late at night. Before midnight, it feels like there is nothing to worry about, but after then, it becomes increasingly uncomfortable. Despite the darkness, however, this wasn't night. It was now afternoon, though that only made it more intimidating to step out into the black. I was considering bringing some sort of weapon, but going and knocking on neighbors' doors with a weapon in hand in the middle of the night of what looked like night probably wouldn't get me invited in. And so I went into the street and began knocking on doors. I began 2 doors down where I was on relatively good terms with the man who lived there. We were the only 2 on the block who lived without families, just 2 single men in their smaller homes with spare rooms. There was an unspoken understanding between us that we reached out to each other first when in need of some help. Most of the families surrounding us had children, after all, and were less likely to have the time or resources to help. His name was Kenneth, and he had knocked on my door late one night when he needed a ride to the emergency room some months ago. He had hurt his hand pretty bad and didn't think he'd be able to handle a steering wheel. As such, I knew he would owe me an understanding reaction to me knocking on his door so late. Except, he didn't answer the door. I tried knocking on his windows and garage before giving up, but there was no response there either. I moved on to the next house between ours and immediately rang the doorbell. No answer. I walked up and down the block knocking, but there was never an answer. I gave up trying to be quiet, trying to only alert the person in the house, but I never heard a noise in return. Even the house next to mine returned nothing but silence when I began beating my fist against the door. I couldn't believe it. This family had an infant son who cried at all hours of the day, even in the dead of night. He seemed triggered by the slightest of noises, and they had even asked me to turn down my television one night so as to not disturb him. Yet he had no reaction tonight. I returned to Kenneth's house, this time ready to let myself in. Without a family to worry about, he was less likely to be on edge, assuming he was even inside, though I truly doubted that. I had a feeling that I was the only one left on our street, that everyone else had left or been evacuated, and I needed to prove it. His front door was locked, but he was definitely the kind of man to leave his back door open. I let myself in, not bothering to sneak around or to tiptoe. I wanted to alert him to my presence if it turned out he was home. I made my way to the end of his house, fully expecting to find an empty bed in an empty room. But it wasn't empty. There he was, Kenneth, close to how I last saw him, just sleeping in bed. His hair was a tad bit messier than usual, and it appeared he was naked if the discarded boxer shorts on the floor were any indication. But he was there. So I said his name. Then I yelled it. I went from soft to shouting in a matter of seconds, unable to understand why I didn't wake him up before, with all my yelling and knocking before. Even at this close proximity, he remained asleep. However, what if he isn't asleep? A chill ran through me as the thought entered my mind. I rushed to the side of his bed, not taking the time to rationalize the possibilities of what could have happened to him. I shook him. I screamed. I tried hitting him, but nothing woke him up. His heart beat faster and his breathing became heavier, but nothing woke him up. Even opening his eyes had no effect. I practically threw him across the room in any attempt to break him out of his slumber, but he fell without any resistance. No change. He was a living corpse, unable to react to anything. But was he the only one? I made my way out of his house, grabbing a spare object on my way, a frying pan that Kenneth had left on the counter. I crossed his yard directly into our neighbors, to the family with the screaming baby that had now become silent, and began to smash at their sliding glass door. I tried to be cautious stepping in, but I couldn't bring myself to care too much when I sliced some of my skin open on the glass. I just needed to get in. I needed to see the parents, the children, the dog, to see if one of them would wake up. But none of them would. The parents shared their bed, their daughters were tucked in, and just like Kenneth, they seemed unable to wake up. I made my way to a room at the end of the hall, one I knew must house their youngest son since he was the only one I hadn't seen yet. I shook, and I shook, and I shook, but the little boy wouldn't wake up. I wanted to take the frying pan and bash his head in, to dare him to move, to dare him to end this insane prank that the whole town seemed to be playing on me, to cry like he did every other night. But I stopped myself. Instead, I was the one who cried. It wasn't manly, it wasn't smart, but it was what I did. I just sat there in that little boy's room and cried, not knowing what else to do. Even calling the police had led to just an answering machine. What else was there? I was all alone in the dark of night. Except I wasn't. I heard a noise and froze. There was something else in the house. Then I heard the noise again. No, it wasn't in the house. It was in the room. And I recognized that sound. It was a sound I could never describe, one that I could never remember, yet somehow it was also a noise I could never forget. It was the sound that woke me up each night. The sound that fades away as I return to consciousness, thinking I only imagined it in the silence. And it was in the room with me. I turned slowly to see the thing that made the sound behind me. It didn't look like a person, and yet it wasn't a monster either. It was impossibly tall, with arms even longer than its legs. It had to hunch to stop its head from pushing straight through the ceiling, and it smiled from ear to ear. No, that wasn't a smile. It didn't have cheeks or skin on its face. It just had teeth. Teeth that stretched from one ear to the other to make it look like it was smiling. But it wasn't. It reached across the room from the little boy's closet, its fingers finding my face from almost a foot away from its palms, and it began to search it. It touched every muscle, every tendon, every pore, every cell in my skin as it explored my features as if it was blind. But it was staring right at me with those bright lights in its dark eyes. This was the only thing that woke me up at night. The thing that woke up this little boy at night. That made him cry out in the darkness because of what he had heard or perhaps even seen. I could feel it in his touch, his loneliness. It followed me, shrieking its strange shriek in the silence that somehow only I could hear, daring me to wake up, daring me to notice him. And I finally did. Today, it finally got me to look him in the eyes and share in the horror of the deafening shrieks it made in its teeth slammed together. Just then, the little boy woke up too. He was barely more than a toddler, and he began screaming, crying just like he did every other night. The creature in the closet turned away from me, its fingers no longer caring to explore my face, and instead, it focused on that poor little boy. I wanted to get in the way, wanted to yell or scream or hit this monster with the frying pan, but I just ran. I ran away from the room, from the house, from the street, and ran until I couldn't anymore. The baby stopped crying before I was out of earshot. I don't want to know what caused him to stop. I just hoped it was that he was like everyone else, that he just went back to sleep. But I don't think that's how this works. It has now been over 24 hours. The sun was supposed to rise again, but I know it won't. In every house, on every street I broke into, I found someone sleeping, but I didn't try to wake them up. I didn't have to. I just knew that I had to keep checking to see if this was something that ended or something that just kept going forever. My tiredness comes and goes now. Sometimes I feel like I am on the brink of passing out, and I welcome it. Then I hear the thing shrieking in the distance, and I'm brought back to a lucid state. No matter how far away I get, I can still hear it, and it is getting closer. As I write this, I am on the edge of town. I found an unlocked door and let myself in, needing to refresh myself with a shower and some food. I doubt the owner will ever wake up, but in case he does, I'm writing this note for him and leaving it on his desktop. I wish I could write more, but I know that the creature is coming for me. I was quiet enough sneaking in here, but no matter how far I go or how quiet I am, it does seem to find a way to catch up with me. I have decided to steal this man's keys and take his car. I'm not proud of this action, but it seems to be the only way I'll be able to get to the next town over without crossing paths with that monstrosity again. I've decided to head north, to my brother's town. I do not think he will be awake, but that has never been the case when I have sought his comfort in the night. Instead, I just hope to find him asleep. Perhaps if I spend the night in his bed, I'll fall asleep as well, as we did back when we were kids. At least, I hope so. If this message does manage to be found, I hope this story can help. On those nights where you awake before the sun comes up, when you know something had to have woken you up, but find yourself surrounded only by silence, know that you aren't crazy. And whatever you do, go back to sleep, if you can. It's late September. You remember these nights? Humid, muggy, just a hint of the coming fall. Too cold for a t-shirt, but too warm for a sweater. These are the nights best spent at Cook Place Community Mall in my modest Midwest hometown. A diamond in the rough, in my eyes, this shopping center is a break from the monotony of tired hardware stores and family grocers that line Main Street. The Cook Place Mall is typically packed to capacity. But not tonight, because it was 8:15 p.m. on a Tuesday night, 45 minutes until close. Not exactly prime window shopping hours. Despite that, my 3 friends and I were still going strong. We were ending the night in the dusty arcade located in the basement of the shopping mall. It was down a short flight of stairs between the Dairy Queen and Sbarro in the food court. Faded and flickering carnival lights lined the dimly lit hallway and steps. "Andy, do you have another quarter?" Philip, my youngest friend, questioned as the words "game over" splattered across the screen. Philip was 12 years old and a bit underdeveloped for his age. Andrew, his older brother, my best friend, and my biology partner scowled as he rummaged through his pockets in vain. "Maybe if you were a bit better at the game, I'd have more quarters for you to play on." It was 8:16 p.m. and it seemed our time in the arcade may be coming to a close. I had a few loose quarters left in my pocket, but that was going to stay my secret. I was hoping to spend it on a Coke tomorrow before class started. Clay, a guy Andy and I had just met in biology, had clearly been waiting for this moment. "Honestly, yeah, guys, it's getting a bit late. I think I'm going to bounce. Gotta study for our exam on cellular reproduction." The exam wasn't for a week yet, but I wasn't bothered. Clay had been acting a bit ambivalent since we got to the mall. Seemed he wasn't a huge fan of having Philip around. Cramped his style or whatever. I didn't care. Philip was pretty much like a brother to me, so he came first. Philip, having realized there would be nary a quarter for him, gave up aimlessly pressing buttons on the greasy machine. "I have to go to the bathroom." "Didn't you just go?" sighed Andy. "Yeah, but we had a large soda." "You had a large soda, kid. By the time I got a sip, it was all backwash." I chuckled as Andy and Philip started away from the arcade machines. Clay, while texting, followed lazily behind them. It was 8:24 and we had located a bathroom. The bathroom we were used to using in the mall on the way out the front door was closed for renovations, so we had to find another one. An L-shaped hallway lit with yellow, humming fluorescent lights ended with a corresponding bathroom on either side of the hall, with custodial equipment blocking the women's entrance. Philip rushed into the restroom. The mall closed at 9 p.m., so we were gonna need to get moving. Sure enough, as the thought crossed my mind, the rattly old mall intercom crackled to life with a ding-dong. An adolescent male's voice spoke sharply. Mall closing in 30 minutes. Mall closing in 30 minutes. I checked my watch. It was 8:26. Huh. Someone's in a hurry to get out of here tonight. I thought, that's retail. Clay spoke up. I might just get going, you guys. I live pretty close to here. I'm just gonna walk instead of the bus. Good night. Night, Clay, we said in unison. He turned his back and walked away, turning right to depart the mall. Andy and I looked at one another. I don't know. Kind of a wet blanket. He seemed really cool when I met him, Andy explained. Nah, he was okay. Maybe just a little bit quiet. The texting was a bit annoying, though. Our attention was drawn to the sound of a flush from the bathroom. Andy's face twisted into a mischievous grin. Hey, we should give Philip a little fright when he comes out. Remembering how jumpy Philip tended to be, I felt a pang of guilt. It really wasn't very nice to spook him, and we did it often. Nevertheless, I stood on the other side of the door, opposite Andy, waiting for Philip to step between us, not expecting a thing. The door swung open. Philip stepped out into the hallway, focused on drying his hands on his pants. He stepped by, none the wiser. He screams. Andy yelled as we each grabbed a shoulder. Philip yelled as he twisted around and fell backwards. Philip fell into the wall. And then Philip fell into the wall. That's the only way I know how to describe it. One moment he had slipped off his feet and crashed into the wall. The next, everything but his legs had gone through the wall, as if there were a perfectly shaped hole in the concrete. Philip's legs spasmed in the air in the same looping, spastic pattern for but a few seconds. And then there was nothing left but solid concrete. What? Andy stuttered as he fell to his knees, his face a mixture of curiosity and confusion. As he shuffled towards the wall, his face turned to fear. I don't understand. I don't understand. Philip? He shouted his brother's name with a desperate, wavering cry. Philip! He slammed his hands into the wall. Once, twice, now a third time. Andy's head now protruded from the wall, facing the ceiling. His head seized from side to side as he continued to scream for his brother. God, he sounded like he was yelling through a box fan. I stepped backwards as my best friend disappeared from sight, and I was left with this scream bouncing off the hallway walls, intensifying as it mixed with the hum of the fluorescent. The howl of the fluorescent. My back pressed against the bathroom door, and I jumped. I screamed as my world exploded with static, deafening, and blinding me. The noise was unbearable, and the grain obscured everything. And all at once it stopped. I clutched my head in my hands, eyes squeezed shut. The static had dissipated, but was replaced with the hum of fluorescent lights, and the all too familiar yellow glow through my eyelids. But there was something new. A smell that hadn't been there before. The musty, wet smell of carpet. Carpet that should have been changed decades ago. The smell reminded me of the dilapidated bowling alley down the road from the mall. I opened my eyes. Before me was the bathroom hallway, as expected, lit by the same light as before. The bathroom doors were gone. There were no more doors, no more custodial equipment, just a smooth slab of concrete wall. I got to my feet and looked around me cautiously. It seemed I was in the mall still, but it was quiet. It felt different. The fluorescent hum buzz was too loud. My ears itch. I walked down the hallway in the direction of the food court. As I turned the corner, I was met with not the opening to the food court as expected, but by another abrupt 90-degree corner turning to the left. Ding dong. I froze. The loudspeaker was engaged. The empty air of the speaker nearest me told me that, but the operator had nothing to say. After a motionless moment, what felt like hours, the microphone snapped back into the console, cutting the empty noise. Whomever had activated the speaker seemed to have hung up. Confused and growing ever more frightful of where I had found myself, I turned the corner. I was met with a large, empty room that I had never seen before. It was about the size of a classroom, with stained concrete walls. The smell of must was even stronger in here. Each wall had an identical, rectangular, door-shaped opening that seemed to be placed at randomly decided positions among the wall. The popcorn ceiling, littered with smears of dirt and greasy imprints, had long cracks spanning it. This room was clearly in need of renovation. I don't understand, I muttered out loud. I truly didn't. This featureless room served no purpose, other than a passageway to these other rooms. The lack of planning and absent attempt at caring for the room made me feel as if this place was long forgotten. Might as well try the next room, thought to myself as I walked through the door to my left. The room I found myself in was as bleak and unrecognizable as the last. From my last glance, the only difference in style was that this room was shaped as a triangle. I heard a single cry from my right. It was more of a whimper, actually. What the fuck? It was Clay's voice. It couldn't be Clay. I watched him leave them all. I rushed through the door to find Clay lying in a fetal position in a long hallway, stretching a distance to my left and right. Change the channel. Change the channel. Clay bobbled incoherently as he sobbed on the floor. Clay? Clay, you gotta get up. Clay didn't respond to me. He never would. His eyes, wide and unblinking with fear, were glued to the floor. How can fluorescent lights be so damn noisy? And then I saw it. And then I felt it. It hung motionless in the air, feet lightly scraping the ground. It had dry, cracked skin that was dressed loosely with torn, rough-spun shorts. It had the torso of a man, but its torso was on the wrong way. Its frail and feeble arms outstretched to the ceiling, not quite reaching, as if in an act of surrender. It had a cocked head, as if confused, as it peered down the hallway at me. Dark, beady eyes stared widely at me through the holes in the bloody duct tape wrapped around its head. And then it started to float towards us. Every time I blinked, stunned in absolute terror, it was not where I expected. A few feet forward, some inches to the left, never where it should be. And yet it was getting closer. Even closer. What I saw next will follow me forever. I turned to run, breaking the stillness, and sprinted down the hallway. I don't know, I guess I just assumed Clay would follow in the moment. I was wrong. A blood-curdling screech shook the hallway, and I whipped around. It had reached Clay. He still wasn't looking, but he was certainly screaming. It extended its long, spindly arms and cradled him like a child. But it wouldn't look away from me. No, its eyes never left mine. In one quick, jerking motion, it was holding Clay by the top of his head palming him like a basketball. I blinked, and it had grasped Clay's arm with its free hand. With brute strength, it twisted Clay by the torso. Clay's screaming cut short with a fleshy crunch as he dropped to the floor in a twisted pile. His eyes had finally opened to look at me one last time. And then I screamed. The louder I screamed, the louder the fluorescent hum became. Which was louder, I couldn't tell. I turned and ran to the first door I saw, blindly twisting and turning through the rooms that followed. Why on earth does every room look the same? I turned a corner and ran face first into a dark mass. We both fell to the floor. Andy! How'd you get down here? Where the hell are we? I don't know, Andy. Where's Philip? We have to get him right now and leave. We turned and rushed down a third hallway, perpendicular to the hallway Andy and I met in. We ran until we felt like we could run no more, and then we fell into a final doorway. We landed in a mass on the damn floor and quickly scooted to the back wall. The hum of the lights was all we could hear. Louder and louder. And then they all went out. Silence. We found ourselves in total darkness and total silence as we clutched each other. No. Wait. Not total silence. The sound of static, as if emitting from a television, slowly coming towards us. Only when the light, coming from the source of the noise, started to slowly illuminate the room did I realize. This room had only one door. It floated around the door frame, toes dragging on the floor as it cast its bloody eyes upon us. Andy and I, mute with fear, stood against the wall. Andy moved himself in front of me. It floated towards us. Andy raised his arms. It reached out for us. Leave us alone. Ding dong. We all become statues. We locked eyes with it as we listened to the intercom crackle to life. Shallow, rapid breathing came through the speaker. Andy? It was Philip. With a guttural scream, Andy lunged towards it. It fell backwards into the wall, and I landed inside of a trash can. What? I was inside of a trash can, filled with the refuse from a full day of food court disposal. Kid? What are you doing in there? I looked out to see a very confused elderly janitor, wondering why a young man was taking a Sbarro bath after mall hours. It was 9:32 p.m. At least that's what the clock over the fountain said. The water fountain. I'm back in the mall. Oh, sorry. I was just hungry. And I ran. In the following years, I would try to make sense of what happened in that back hallway. I even went so far as to returning there and trying to access that place. But to no avail. I never found a thing, but I kept trying until they demolished the mall a year later. Philip and Andy's parents weren't really present when they were around, so they didn't make much of a deal on TV when they were interviewed, despite the media trying to fire them up. They just seemed like it was the final straw to send them to total apathy. Last I heard, Clay's parents moved out of town, but were paying exorbitant PI bills to find their son. After a few years of half-assed detective work and a few rotations of milk cartons, Andy and Philip were forgotten by our sleepy little town. But sometimes when I'm going to sleep, I remember. And I leave the TV on Channel 3. There's nothing broadcasting on that channel. but the static helps me sleep. Hey everyone, I hope that you enjoyed tonight's episode. If you have any stories of your own, please feel free to send them over to talesfromthebud@gmail.com. Also, go check us out on YouTube because I'm thinking about doing some other crazier videos that I may not post as episodes on the podcast. So yeah, go give us a look. Thank you so much, and never forget, don't sleep tonight.